Hey, what's good world? This is Andre Fernandez here, back with a Commonwealth Games action update from Glasgow as promised. Now, the action so far has been a mixed bag, and in one word, I'll say interesting. Definitely worth the watch. The biggest talking point by far has got to have been the traditional Scottish weather. Now, we can't complain too much because we knew from 2014 and 1986 exactly what Scottish weather was like for Commonwealth Games, and it's delivered once again. We are lucky to have the games on because remember, up to 2 years ago, we were going to have no games. So thank you again, Glasgow, and we appreciate your local hospitality. Now, I've got my notes down here to guide me, as usual. So let's tuck into my main talking points beyond the weather, of course. So up until Wednesday, we're talking pure Scottish sog. Rain-soaked finals all over the place. However, the 100-meter finals for both men and women, able-bodied that is, they didn't disappoint. Now, we knew the fields were going to be quite light, but we knew the talent at the top going into the semis and the finals was going to be where all the action's at, and the standards will be where what we expect for a major global championships. They didn't disappoint. We're going to start with the men. Now, anyone in this field could have claimed a case to take the gold. Emmanuel Esame steps up in rainy conditions, a wet track, rain coming down, and he drops a 9.83. Yep, national record to take the gold. Just behind him, 9.85, Lachlan Kennedy, Oceania record, of course, an Australian record, and now the fastest white man in history. We didn't, unfortunately, bag a home nation's medal in the sprints, despite having some serious talent lining up. We did, however, have Amy Hunt medal for the women in that 100-meter final. The winner of this race, though, the time was probably more of a surprise in the conditions. But again, just like the men, any of the women lining up in this final could have claimed victory here. It went to Zoe Hobbs in a New Zealand and Oceania record of 10.93. Stunning performance, and it was such a close final. In terms of the endurance, there's not really much to report on this stage. We are still going through a lot of the heats, the semis, finals for most of the distances. The 10,000 meters for both men and women have been run. They were run in very wet conditions, and you saw the conditions play a part in the race. There was major controversy in the women's wheelchair 1500 meter final. Now, there was a big crash which took out 4 to 5 athletes. So this race, despite being won by a Scottish athlete, will have to be rerun in a couple of days' time. Canada dominate the heavy throws so far. Now, we do have the men's shot final to come, and we are expecting Tom Walsh to walk away with his 3rd consecutive final. But we had Ethan Katzberg and Cameron Rogers setting games records in storm-like conditions. The rain was pooling. The women's hammer had to be stopped at one point because it was that dangerous. She then steps back into the circle, Cameron Rogers that is, steps back into the circle to deliver a games record. The men's javelin is still set for a barnstormer. Ramesh Pattarage, he leads the qualifiers against all the names that I mentioned in my previous preview. So if you haven't watched that, go back and watch and get yourself back up to speed. An athlete who didn't make the final, who missed out on by a couple of places, was Julius Yago, a familiar name in that event, a familiar name at the Commonwealth Games, former world champion, former Commonwealth champion. He doesn't make the final, but he did put in a stellar effort considering the form he's in this year. The jumps have suffered quite badly. The women's high jump was a washout. We're talking regular 2-meter plus jumpers from Australia battling it out at the top. It was won in, what was it, 195? Wasn't great, and it was just tough for them to watch. The same with the men's high jump. The performance that was won in 225, bronze taking 220. I mean, Kamani Jack will be disappointed with the bronze, but nevertheless, in those conditions, the competition itself, the athletes pushing each other to the limit in those conditions, was still up there and what we would expect in a global champs. Men's long jump suffered pretty bad. Now we're talking gold medal won in 8.15. We will move on to the mile. They are set, both the men's and the women's mile are set for insatiable competition with incredible times. If there is a world record to be run at this champs, it's likely to come from the men's mile. Equally, the form that I'm seeing from the 100-meter hurdlers, watch this space, it may well come in that event. Now, I want to raise an observation that I noticed in contrast between the long sprints and the short sprints. Now, for the one lappers, I'm seeing times quite down on qualifying. Yes, the semis were okay, but again, the men's and the women's times could and should have been faster in comparison to previous championships. Now we go to the hundreds that I mentioned earlier. Those times that we saw in the final were electric. The times that we were seeing in the semi-finals were electric in wet conditions. We've seen the women's 100-meter hurdles dropping electric times here. We're talking 12:1 to 12:3 for heat winners. Now, if they were cruising and taking it easy because the competition was low, we would have seen slower times in the short hurdles in line with what we saw in the 400s. I've got a feeling it's something to do with the wind that the athletes are experiencing on the back straight. They're having to conserve, they're having to fight, and obviously the momentum. So in a fully enclosed stadium, we would see much faster times, and we would see a much more even correlation between the one laps and the short sprints. In relation to that observation, I'm also seeing the in-stadium commentators mentioning the trains that they can see through the stadium as they pass in the background. Now, if you're seeing that, tells you that the stadium's not really full and there is space for the home straight to become a wind tunnel. Added to that, the comments that the back straight boys have made about the standards going into these games, now putting into what we're seeing unfold in the games and the weather conditions, the comments from the TV commentators, their claim that this is likely to feel like an inter-counties meet kind of holds up. Hold tight, Jody and Bayo. Yeah, I heard that, and I have to agree at this point. I am, of course, confident and hoping that the finals that we have to come, both men and women's miles, the 400 flats, the 400 hurdles, and the women's 100 hurdles, bring some credence and credibility in terms of times and standards that we usually expect, in line with what we would see at the Kuala Lumpur Games in 1998, the Manchester Games in 2002. Let's hope that this Games gets saved and we're not subjected to inter-county standards. That is my roundup complete. I'm going to leave it there. I will see you on Monday for a detailed review. Until then, enjoy the rest of the games.